Hi, and welcome to tonight's Action Coaching Club live training call. I'm Lou Dallo. Nice to be here with you, and it's a pleasure to have you here with me tonight. Tonight we're going to be doing a little bit of an overview training on data backup tools and strategies. So tonight's subject is actually I think it's one of the more important things that very few people talk about. And I just want to talk real quickly about the real need for backups. I don't know if it's ever happened to you that you've been in the situation where one of your drives goes down and it happens to be the only drive that had the data on there that's the only instance of the data that you had. Now, a lot of people experience this in their personal lives, like most people who have home computers and they use their computers for, home photos and videos and things like that. They don't usually back up. People aren't accustomed to backing up, and on occasion a drive will fail. Seems like sometimes, lately it seems like more than usual. And when it does, there's this really awful feeling that develops in the pit of your stomach, like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get these things back? I can never recreate them. It's a little bit like if, for personal purposes, it's like you're in the old days when you had a shoebox full of photo albums or photographs, if that happened to get stolen or caught fire or didn't make it in the move from one house to another or something, it's really gut wrenching, to see so many valuable things no longer accessible. And of course, on a personal level, it comes with its own consequences, right? There's emotional, sentimental consequences, and sometimes even financial consequences, like if your tax records aren't backed up or anything like that. But that pain is, I don't want to say doubled or tripled or quintupled because I don't know how to put a number on it, but it significantly increases when you realize that not only did you lose all of these personal items, but all the things you've been working on for the last year, 2 years, 3 years, in my case recently, 8 years in your business, all the courses that you delivered, all of the content you created, all of the videos, marketing videos that you had online, all of the financial records, all of your accounting, all of your shopping cart data, all of your contact lists, your email lists, when you start to realize how much is actually at risk, it starts to really augment the pain of losing data. And I wish I could say that there's a good chance that it won't happen, and there is a relatively good chance that it won't happen, but there's an increasingly good chance that it will happen. It's still fairly small, but to me, it really isn't worth the price. It isn't worth the risk. If you can put a few simple things into place, you can mitigate that risk and sleep at night and know that your data is safe and secure. In your business, if some kind of catastrophic situation happens, you'll be able to recover and move on. Sometimes you lose a day, sometimes a week, but it's never something that's years and years worth of data. So I'm going to talk about some of the way, the need for that and some of the ways that we can use it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the goals of backing up, and then some tools and processes. I'm just going to walk you through how I sort of developed from where I started to where I am now with my backup process. And I'll show you the exact tools that I use. And you'll see they're pretty easy. And some are fairly affordable, some are a little bit more on the expensive side. But you'll see you'll have options. And you certainly don't have to start off with the configuration I have. I mean, it's a little bit pricier. But I've got 8 years worth of business, and I've got like literally thousands of hours worth of coaching recordings, marketing content, interviews, workshops, and all that stuff. So, for me, it's worth paying a little extra. But I would venture to say, here's what I discovered. The process I'm using now, if I'd have used it in the first place, even though it would have cost me more initially, probably would have saved me more in the long run. And so I'm going to actually recommend that you consider something similar to the one that I'm doing now. And, like I said, it's a little bit of an initial investment. But if you have room in your budget, do think about it, because it'll save you a lot in the long run, and it'll make it possible for you not to have to change your procedures and change your drives and change your configurations as you grow. This is something that will take good care of you for a long time. So in terms of guiding principles, right, I mentioned it's not if, but when you'll lose data. Even hard drives, when they come out of the manufacturer, they come up with a I don't know what they call it, a lifespan, that they have an end of life. They have an anticipated life cycle for it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it makes it all the way to the life cycle, to the end of the life cycle. And if you're really lucky, it makes it beyond. And if you're really lucky, you've moved the data onto a bigger disk because you needed more capacity. And so you never find out when you were going to lose the data on the other one because you've tossed it because you moved over to a bigger drive. However, I've had drives that failed on initial installation, within a month, within 6 months, within a year, within 2 years. There's no rhyme or reason. Some of these things that they're just built in. They're not 100% guaranteed. They're not 100% reliable. They're highly reliable, and you can get them replaced. But it's not the drives that's the irreplaceable part. It's the content, right? So there's a couple of different kinds of backup that you want to sort of protect against. So one is you inadvertently lose, delete data. You erase a file by accident, or you meant to delete the file, but you ended up deleting the folder instead of just one file. You deleted 1,000, stuff like that. Or maybe there's a glitch on the drive and a couple of applications are competing for each other and it causes corruption on the drive somehow. Maybe there was a power failure, and as your drive wound down, it didn't close all the files, and it got its pointers mixed up and the data was corrupt. Little things like that can happen anytime. Even if the drive is working fine, are the first level of protection you want to create. The second one is if the disk drive actually fails, because in that case, you'll actually find that data recovery is not an inexpensive thing. I actually had to recover data off one of my drives once, and it was probably about 5 or 10 times the cost of the drive itself. And the bigger the drive, because as it turns out, they actually, I don't know if this is common anymore, but they charge you by the hour. And if you have a large drive, like I had a 2 terabyte drive full of data, and they have to analyze the entire disk. They have to make sure that all the sectors are intact. They have to make sure that all the pointers in the data are in the right place. They have to make sure the directory indexes are all the same. I mean, there's a whole, and yes, it's done automatically by a computer, but it still takes a lot of time. And they charge you by the hour, believe it or not. And I said, well, why would you charge me by the hour? I mean, you're not actually working. And he said, well, that's true. But while your disk is on my machine for those hours, I can't put somebody else's disk on that machine, so I need to charge you for the time. And then, of course, if it happens to be especially corrupt and they need to dig in a little deeper, or they need special tools or all that kind of stuff, it can get really, really expensive. But even if you don't want to replace it, let's say you don't have a backup and that disk drive fails, that's when you kind of wake up and go, uh-oh, not a good situation. So you want to prevent and secure yourself against disk drive or other technology failure. And then the last level is theft, or what I call catastrophic failure. So catastrophic failure, well, obviously theft, you know what theft is, right? And so no matter how many backup drives you have, if someone happens to come into your house and steal your drives and your computers, well, you still lost everything, no matter how many. They take your primary and your backup data, and it all goes. So that's a really interesting issue to think about. And the other one is catastrophic failure, which is everything. The worst case scenario. The network goes down, the drives fail, the backups fail. It's all the gremlins possible are in the system. Now, this is not something that happens a lot, but it can happen, and it can happen on site. The thing to think about this when you're thinking about theft or catastrophic failure is that if you have a system-wide problem, like let's say you had a virus, and a virus went in and wiped out all the files on your network, guess what? That's a catastrophic failure. And it'll wipe out not only your primary data, but also your backup data. So it's good, if you can, to have your on-site data also backed off off-site, so that viruses can't travel the network to your offline and to your off-site backups. Okay, so we want to protect against 3 levels. The everyday thing that can happen just as a matter of course. We inadvertently do stuff to delete files or applications, corrupt files or things like that. Number 2 is a disk drive or similar technology failure. Number 3 is when both our primary and backup data is affected, and we need to recover from that kind of thing. So the way I look at it is I think about backing up my data. That's the first level, right? And that, if I back up my data, that's going to allow me to recover when I inadvertently delete a file, or if I inadvertently, if I run into file corruption problems, whatever. I'm just a simple first level backup. The second level backup is when I'm backing up my backup, so that if my drive fails, well, and the backup drive happens to fail, for example, well, now I've backed it up. I've created a redundant backup, we call it, so that I can afford for even my backup drive to fail. And then back up your backup offsite or offline. And so that means if you can think of a way to put it into the cloud, on the internet, or on some offsite storage facility or something, if you can have your data backed up in two separate locations, then that's even better again. Okay, so these are kind of the three things that I look at: backing up my data. I guess I should say they're backing up my primary data, backing up my backups, and then getting my backups offline. Okay, you don't need to see all that. So here's kind of how I started. Now I'm using a Mac, but it's only because those are the first images I found online. So this is not a Mac only situation. If you're using a PC, just replace the images of a Mac with a PC. It's the same thing. When I started this, I was using PCs, and until like a year or two ago, it was all PC based. So there isn't any difference in the tools or the processes, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. Well, some of the software might be different, but I'll show you the options that I used for both. So I had my main PC, my desktop PC, and then I have a laptop. And usually, I've always had a desktop and at least one laptop. So I do most of my work. The desktop tends to be a faster processor, a bigger screen, all that kind of stuff. I do most of my work there. So I consider that sort of my home drive, my primary drive. And then what I want to do, of course, is I want to back up my primary drive. So I had been using, when I first got started, a USB drive, an external drive connected to the PC at the time. And I used various kinds of software, but they were all intended to do one thing, and that is to take all of the data from my hard drive and make a copy of it on my external hard drive. So the hard drive inside the Mac, and then just make a copy of whatever content I had on the desktop, and make an identical copy over to the external hard drive. And so should anything happen to this drive, or should anything happen to the external drive, I still had an identical copy of the data somewhere else that I could recover. So if my internal drive failed, I sent it off to Dell or whatever, or I bought a new drive, reinstalled my operating systems and all that stuff, and then I just copy the data from here, from the external drive onto the new PC, or onto the new drive internally. Or if my USB drive failed, then I just tossed it out, spent another $100 to replace it, and then did a backup to recreate the data on there that was corrupted. So nice and simple, right? Now, one thing that I've always done too is, well, I shouldn't say I've always done it, but what I found was that I oftentimes was working on the same files, and I had a copy of the file on my laptop, I had a copy of the file on my desktop, and sometimes in the early days I would travel a lot, and so I had a hard time keeping the files on my desktop synchronized with the files on my laptop. And even if I was at home, I found myself with 2 or 3 copies of the same file and never remembering which was which. So it didn't take me long before I started using a synchronization capability. And what I do is I think of my laptop kind of as a client or as a satellite, just a utility tool. I don't think about it as a storage tool. So what I do is I think about the files on my main computer as the main files, because I know those are being backed up, right? I'm assuming I'm not backing up my laptop. Because, I mean, who wants to carry around a USB drive everywhere with their laptop, you know? And I usually had 500 gigs or more, so I couldn't use a shuttle drive. So I just said, to heck with it. You know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a synchronization software. And I use one of these are the 3 I've used that I like the most. The one I'm using right now is called GoodSync. And I've been using it probably for 6 years or so, but I'm especially enjoying using it now. It has the features and functionality have increased dramatically and kept up with technology. So that's a really favorite program of mine. I think it's like 20 or 30 bucks. And then Dropbox is a service that I use. I use Dropbox because I need to synchronize with external vendors sometimes and freelancers, and sometimes with my admin assistant. And so I don't know how to, I can't get them access to my network from outside, from wherever they happen to be. So what Dropbox does is it gives me a place in the cloud to put files, and when I put them there, they instantly appear on my vendors or partners or virtual assistants computers, and they also synchronize instantly with every computer that I have an account on. So if I have my Dropbox account on my laptop, I have a Dropbox account on my desktop, and then my assistant has a Dropbox account on her desktop, then any file that is shared into the Dropbox, it appears on all the computers at once. Well, I say at once, but of course it takes time to upload and download files, so there's a latency delay for the uploading and downloading, but provided the file isn't huge, it's usually seconds or minutes before they're all up to date. In the house, if I put a file on the Dropbox from the laptop into the Dropbox, by the time I walk over to the desktop, it's already there. Right, so it's pretty much instantaneous. And then what that allows me to do, so instead of saving my files, sometimes when you're on your laptop, you usually save your files to the local My Documents folder, or to the downloads, or to the user, etc., etc. Well, instead, what you'll want to do, or what you can consider doing, is creating the hierarchy of folders inside your Dropbox. And then every time while you're working on your laptop, it's automatically updating your desktop. And you always think about the files on your hard drive here on your desktop as temporary. They're just work in progress. You can delete them anytime. They can go anytime. And if they're in the Dropbox and the hard disk fails, no problem, because they're automatically backed up by the Dropbox. Okay, so that's an important tool. And when I was working on the PCs, on the PC network, what they used to call Live Sync is now called Live Mesh. And Live Mesh is also a tool that acts a little bit like Dropbox, except it does actually have a cloud component now as well. But in the beginning, it didn't even have a cloud component. I just really cared that it kept my files on my desktop and my laptop synchronized, right? And so that effectively eliminates the need for me to create an additional level of backup for the laptop, which makes things easy. Now, of course, this is all done over Wi-Fi or Ethernet if I have one. There's no direct connection between the PCs. And the other thing that happens now is that GoodSync itself also does a little bit of live sync, or you can schedule things to be synced. So if you don't happen to want a Dropbox account, then all you need to do is set up a folder on your desktop, and you could call it home server or something, and then you say that I want this server, I want this folder synced, and then you go to your laptop and you install GoodSync, and you say, okay, I want the files in this folder synced with the one on my desktop. So GoodSync will keep those things in sync with you. Now GoodSync will actually back up as well as synchronize. Okay, so Dropbox doesn't back up. It just it just synchronizes things, but it doesn't archive and move things off to other drives and all that kind of stuff, right? So for example, I couldn't put a Dropbox on my USB port. On my USB drive or any other network access device, whereas I could with GoodSync. So typically I'll use GoodSync for any backing up, and I'll use Dropbox just to keep the data synchronized in the first place between my laptop, my vendors, my partners, and my desktop. Okay, so there's usually, for example, if you go into my folder on the Mac, in the My Documents folder, there's a thing there called actually, all I do is I share it and I say I want this to be part of my Dropbox, right? So I put my Dropbox in my Documents folder, and I put all of my work in progress, things that I'm working on, in that folder. Then eventually I'll come to the desktop and I'll archive it away. Once the work is done, I'll put it in the folders that it belongs, take it out of the Dropbox, and then it'll immediately get deleted off of the laptop. It'll immediately get deleted off everybody else's Dropbox, and it'll show up in my archives. Okay, so think about that just like in the old days they used to call it a briefcase, a shuttle. Okay, now so that's basic. When you're getting started, this might be all you need. And of course, if you only have a desktop, or if you only have a laptop, well, then all you need is your computer and a USB drive, and you can back up. Now that takes care of handling your primary data, but it doesn't take care of if you happen to have corrupt, and you're going to say what's the chances of this, and I'm going to tell you it happened to me, that you inadvertently delete a file on your desktop at the very moment that this drive decides to crash, and now you've got no copy of your copy. So what I ended up doing actually was I ended up creating what I call a redundant backup, right? So I would, in the old days, I would stack up USB drives, and I would make sure that the one drive was an image of the desktop, and then this drive itself got copied to this drive, and this drive got copied to the other drive. Now here's what happened. I wanted to go on when I used to work in corporate America, we used to call it son, father, grandfather, right? So this is the son, which is the youngest data, the most recent data, and then every day, for example, we'd back it up to the father, and then every week we back up the father to the grandfather. Now, it's a little bit more complex to do, but of course you can automate the whole thing with GoodSync. You just set up some jobs and they run once a day or once a week, whenever you want. And what that does is it basically means I have a pretty much an instant copy, a duplicate of what's on my drive here. So in real time, even if I happen to lose something that I was working on an hour ago, it's already backed up because the synchronization does that. Secondly, it means that I have, if I work for an entire day and I go, oh, gee, you know, I was working on something yesterday, I deleted it, I wish I had it, I can go back a day. And then, you know, this gives me a little bit of wiggle room to make some moves, make some changes. And then I figure, you know, once a week, I've pretty well decided what I need and don't need, what I'm going to delete and not going to delete. So the stuff that's on this drive every week is likely going to be a pretty good indication of what I want to keep long term, and I'd back it up. So now I could go, I would have basically 3 copies of a file, potentially 3 copies of a file, which would go a day back, a week back, and sometimes a month back. Sometimes in the grandfather would be a month. And it's just a way to do revision control fairly easily. Because, you know, it does happen sometimes. You go, oh, I wish I had that copy a month ago or something. It doesn't happen. But then what I found was it wasn't happening a lot. And so I would just make, you know, day and week copies. But here's the other thing I found. I realized that, uh-oh, now I got to back up these backups. So I actually need 6 drives instead of 3, so that I can make sure that all these backups are backed up. And now I've got a real mess on my hands in terms of, it wasn't difficult because, like I said, you can automate the entire thing in software. But, you know, I've got like 6 drives on my desktop now. And every 6 months I needed a new drive because I ran out of space, right? Because I do a lot of videos, and when you save the original format, the raw video format, they're, you know, gigabytes worth of size. And so I just kept buying the newest and newest drives as soon as they came out, because there was a lot of content, a lot of data that I needed. Like right now I'm using 3 terabyte drives, you know, and I'm filling them faster than I can buy them. So I thought, okay, I need another solution, because I don't want to, number one, I don't want to keep, because here's what happened. When I bought a new drive, then I had to figure out how to set these up. Like, do I make the new drive, the big drive, the current drive, because that's where I'm doing all the data, or do I make it the oldest drive? And what I ended up doing is I said, well, if this only is a reflection of what's on here, then this drive only has to be as big as the drive on the PC. But you know, I keep backing up from here to here, which means that the middle drive, sort of the father drive, should be bigger than the son drive, because it will be receiving a lot of son data. So it's accumulation of, you know, weekly stuff, but it's only as much as a week at a time or anything. So the bigger drive has to then be the grandfather. And so what would happen is every time I bought a new drive, I had to go through an entire backup cycle. I had to move the grandfather onto the new drive, the father onto the grandfather, the son onto the father, and then get rid of the son, and then drop these in the stack, make sure that they now synchronized. I had to change all of the synchronization stuff, and then make sure that they backed up properly to the redundant service, because if any one of them failed, now, by the way, that is getting a little bit obsessive, I understand, because you could say, well, so what if the middle drive fails? You know, you still have data of the son and the grandfather, and you'd be absolutely right. So you could just leave it at that. But I was, I'm a little obsessive about this stuff, so I actually had 6 drives on my desk. I think you'll be okay with this, but I'm just telling you kind of what I did. So if you have, what you could do is you could actually have a son, father, grandfather approach, or you just keep increasing the size of these two and make this consistently the size of your desktop, and then just back it up and then make the third one a redundant image of the second one. So if you don't care that you need a today's copy, last week's copy, and a month's copy of your data, then all you need is 3 drives, but you use them a little bit differently. You make the first one a mirror image of what's going on live for you on your desktop. The second one is your primary backup of all your data. And then your third one is the redundant backup of your first backup. And then that way you're covered should the drive break. And as long as these drives are big enough to handle all your backup data, then you're in great shape. And so, there's a bunch of cords, USB cords and stuff you have to put, and there's a little mess on the desk, but your data is safe. And again, most of this can be automated and controlled by GoodSync. Now, what I recommend to clients these days is that you use something that is called a RAID backup. And RAID essentially just basically means that these 2 drives are identically configured at all times. Like when you write to one drive, it flows through to the other drive, so that literally in real time these drives are mirrored copies of each other. So if you back up from your desktop to one of the RAID drives, then automatically you're backing up to the second RAID drive. And this is an excellent thing if you want to, if you have enough capacity here. Like I think these drives, they're called G-Safe, they'll handle up to 3 terabytes worth of data. So if you don't have more than 3 terabytes worth of data in all of your data, then this could be as much as you need to do your all of the main kinds of backups. Because what you could do is you could just back up your daily computer stuff to a folder on the main drive that's called, desktop image or whatever, desktop mirror. And then it automatically gets backed up to the backup drive, which is itself, and then a redundant drive is created. So this didn't exist when I first started, but they're coming out now and they're becoming increasingly affordable. So this might be a good approach. Now, the reason I didn't go with this particular approach or some of the standard RAID approaches is because I run out of data fast. I run out of space fast, right? So what I needed was a way to be able to grow my system in real time without having to constantly change devices and without having to use a USB and an internet and a FireWire and a this and a G drive and a RAID drive and trying to keep track of what drive means what and everything. And so I started looking around for solutions, and there were a bunch of drives like this, like the G drive. And actually what I was looking at was taking a couple of G drives and then backing them up to prevent the catastrophic situation, right? So this is good to create all but the theft and catastrophic backup. But if I had another one, I would be in great shape. I would have the RAID backup here, which makes sure that I have an identical copy of all my data, and then I could have a weekly or daily backup of this thing. So I would be all covered. Problem is 3 terabytes. Well, at the time they didn't have 3 terabytes. 3 terabytes is fairly recent. At the time they had 1 and 2 terabytes, and it wasn't enough for me. So what I finally found was a thing called DRobo, and you can go to drobo.com, and I'm gonna spare you a lot of the technology of all this, but here's, from a functional point of view, this sounded to me like if I had to do a wish list of everything that I wanted to do with my backup drive, it does. So here's what happens. You can see that 1, 2, 3. This particular chassis is, I think, called DRobo S, which it means like it's desktop. It sits next to your computer. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drives. This particular configuration. Spell it DRobo, Julie. And what this thing does for you is you don't have to worry about which is drive 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You treat the entire thing as space, and you put stuff wherever you want it. What the DRobo drive does automatically for you is it makes copies of all of your data, and it distributes them across all 5 of your disks, or if you only have 1 or 2 or 3, it distributes them across all of it. So it automatically backs it up, and it automatically creates a RAID configuration, which means that there's even in my configuration, for example, 2 drives could fail at any time and I wouldn't lose any data. Okay, and I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is plug this baby in. I don't have to configure it. I don't have to worry about RAID. I don't have to about who backs up what or whatever. I put it in there. This is they call it Beyond RAID, because the other cool thing about it is if suddenly I run out of space, like for example when I first bought them, when I first bought my DRobo, I had 2 terabyte drives in them. Well, now, of course, I ran out of space. I need to put 3 terabytes. So I grabbed my Western Digital 3 terabyte Caviar, and guess what? I get to, it's going to tell me which drive to pull out, or I can just pull out any drive I want. And I put the new one in, and then it goes, we got a new drive. We better reconfigure all our data. And it reconfigures itself to the new configuration using the new drive with the new capacity, expands the overall space allowed, and it just kind of works magically. And then it, when it's done, it pops up a little thing on my computer, says, okay, I'm done, you can use your drive. And suddenly I've got 3 more terabytes of redundant RAID backup. So to me, this is like heaven, right? Because it's one device on my desktop. Now I do have 5 internal drives on it, but I can remove any of those drives with higher capacity. And there may come a point where it won't support some level of capacity because the technology might change, but I don't think so. So as the 4 terabyte drives and the 5 terabyte drives come out, all I need to do is buy them, replace one of my 1 or 2 terabyte drives in there, and suddenly I added four terabytes capacity, and it'll reconfigure itself automatically. And I don't have to take the machine down or fire it up. I literally can just take the cover off, pull the drive out, put the new one in. I'm done. It's called hot swapping. You can do it while it's live, and in the background it goes and works itself all into the new configuration, and it's like magic. So this is my favorite thing, and this is what I'm using right now. I've been using it for about probably 7 or 8 months now. Not a long time, but couldn't be happier with it. Now, here's the thing. Being as obsessive as I am, I know that the DRobo drive could, if there's a power failure and it affects the electronics and it blows up all 5 drives, which is not likely to happen, but it can happen with a power surge. Guess what? I just fried my DRobo drive, didn't I? And RAID or no RAID, redundant or no redundant, hot swap or not, I lost all my data again. So what I do now is I have a second DRobo drive, okay, and this is a server drive. It's a network device, and it sits on my home network. And then once a day or so, GoodSync goes and grabs whatever I changed on DRobo today and makes a mirror image of it on the server. Okay, so anything happens to this drive, I got this guy. Anything happens to this guy, I got this drive. They're identical. Okay, I never use this drive physically. Like, I don't go there and add files or configure files or change files or whatever. All this is becoming a redundant RAID of the DRobo. Now, I don't remember exactly, but I think the devices cost like $700 or $1,000 each. So, it cost a couple of $1,000, I think, to get this configuration in, and then of course the price of the drives. So it's not cheap, but if you add up all of the money that I paid when I was adding a drive, replacing a drive, changing a drive, adding the next one, replacing, if you add up all the money of those drives, like I've probably thrown away 10 drives, right? And they're $150 each, so there's $1,000 in drives anyway. And all the time to reconfigure and back up and make sure, all that kind of stuff. So it was, for me, very good insurance and a decent price to pay. Now, if you don't have that kind of budget, what I'd recommend is you look at these G-Safe drives, and you get a couple of them. One for the redundant RAID backup, and the other one for, to save you against some kind of catastrophic failure of both drives. It's a little less expensive, I think, than DRobo, but it doesn't have the ability to infinitely expand. So if that has value for you, then that's what I would do. Okay, and all of these things are my home network, and of course, the home router, the wireless, and the network is connected here. So that's fine. But as it turns out, I was talking to these guys about the DRobo servers, and what they were saying is, ideally you'd want that server in another location altogether, because what happens if somebody comes into your place and steals everything? What are you going to do? I said, well, yeah, I don't have a whole other place. I can just plug in a drive. My parents don't have internet, for one thing, and I don't have another house that I could dedicate to to plug this thing in. And so I started looking at offline storage situations. And I've been through, look, I'm going to give you all of the options that I've been through, but what I'm going to tell you is, in the end, I still figure that Amazon is going to work out to be the cheapest way overall. Now, you may find you want to use some of the other ones. A lot of people don't want to use Amazon for this kind of thing because, it's storage costs and everything else. But listen, if you're smart about the data that you back up, and you use a strategy that I'm going to teach you here that's going to help you optimize the prices, then you're going to be in great shape, and you're not going to have any concerns about storage. And if you are paying a lot for storage, hopefully that means it's because you're making a lot of money, and you can afford $50 or $100 a month to keep your data safe and secure. So now what I do is, what I added to my configuration is what I would call disaster/theft recovery. So in the event that something weird happens, like my house burns down, or my stuff gets stolen, or a power surge bursts in and blows up all my devices, whatever, I know that I've got my most important data stored on Amazon on an S3 account. And again, GoodSync, it does understand Amazon, and so I have a GoodSync job that goes in and grabs the DRobo server files and makes a mirror image into the Amazon Web Service. Okay, and it just kind of backs things up. I actually think I only do it weekly. But you could do it daily because it doesn't cost much to take a look, compare the files, and go, oh, nothing's changed, right? So, if you don't mind having, like in my case, I figure the chances of that disaster situation are pretty slim. So, in the event that it does happen, I'll be very grateful to only have to go back a week to get my data. But it really doesn't cost you that much more to do it daily. So I'm going to have to rethink that. Maybe I will do it daily. I think the reason I didn't is because with Amazon, if you do it daily, every time you do a directory listing or you do things that are going to cause Amazon to transfer data to you, or you make requests of Amazon, even though it's like a fraction of a penny each, I just thought, well, I have like literally hundreds of thousands of files in there. And over time, I just kind of figured daily is going to end up costing me a fortune. So I decided to do it weekly. And you could even do it monthly, because trust me, if all hell breaks loose and you lose everything, you're going to be glad that you just have to make up a month instead of years, right? So there are other services beside Amazon that do these things, and I'll list them for you later. But when I did the math, and when I looked at being able to integrate it with the same software across all of my network to do my backups consistently, it just seemed to make sense to me, so I went with Amazon. And then people say, well, sure, but what about your websites? Well, websites are kind of a different beast, right? And so number one, websites, your hosting provider might actually be doing backups on your website for you. But here's the thing, there's a caveat there, because if you have a certain number of files, or you're using a certain amount of space, or the backup exceeds a certain size, like let's say they back everything up, and in my case on HostGator, if it's more than 4 gigabytes, they won't save it, they won't back it up. So if you have small domains, small websites, and they have less than 4 gig of a backup, which means 4 gig compressed, and they have a thing called inodes, and inodes just means the number of files. And so if the number of files you have falls below their inodes limit, then they'll be backing up for you. You'll be okay, right? However, I'm not 100% sure I feel comfortable with that, number one. Number two, I don't want to have to remember and keep track of, am I over the limit? Am I under the limit? Am I, how many files do I have? That, to me, that's administration work that I don't want to have to hold in my consciousness. So instead what I do is I create a folder on my dRobo, and I back up from my domains into a folder that I think it's just called websites. And for every website, basically for every cPanel, I have a folder, and I just use GoodSync to move files from to synchronize. They have a synchronization utility, so that the files on my disk are synchronized, i.e., they are identical to the files on my website. Okay, and that works really well. The only other thing that you have to bear in mind here is that you'll want to back up your databases. Okay, so this is going to back up all the files, but you'll probably want to go in periodically and also back up your databases. So right now I'm still doing that manually, but I'm sure that there's a way to program either in the cPanel or there's a utility that'll do it. But if you have to do it by hand, I mean, literally you log in, you go to the backups, you say create a database backup, save it to my hard drive. It takes only 5 minutes. Of course, I don't like to have to do things manually if I don't have to, but right now that is a manual part of what I'm doing, and I'm sure there's a way to automate it. I just haven't figured it out yet. But just remember that the files you see on your disk on your website are not the only data. In fact, if you have WordPress blogs, the data that you save are actually saved in databases. So you want to make sure that your MySQL databases, where all of your blog information, all of your blog posts, your images, all that stuff, your themes, well, actually not your themes, but your theme content, that's all stored in a MySQL database, and you won't see that on the website. You've got to actually go in and get the backup to go do a MySQL backup. Okay, so keep that in mind. And maybe there's a better utility to do this as well. I haven't found one yet, but for now, the way I'm doing it is sort of consistent and easy for me, because I only have to sort of do it with one piece of software, but I do have this little hiccup that I have to manually back up my databases. But actually, so I just totally forgot about this. So here's what I'm doing. I'm using Backup Buddy by iThemes to go back up my WordPress blogs, and that happens automatically, right? So so I'm not backing up my WordPress blogs anymore either. That's being done by a little plugin that you could put into your WordPress blog, and it's called Backup Buddy. If you go to ithemes.com and look up their plugins, you'll find it there. It's not free, but it's not very expensive, and it does a really great job, because it not only backs up your MySQL data, it backs up your files, your themes, your plugins, the whole thing, and it does a really good job if you have to migrate it from one domain to another, about being able to do that too. Okay, so now that will back up my WordPress, but again, if I'm using certain applications and software that use databases, I still have to do those manually. So typically, I'll go in once every couple of days or whatever, sometimes once a week, and I'll just save all my database files. It's a 5-minute job. The only thing is I have to remember to do it. And luckily I haven't had to ever recover that, but keep that in mind, okay? So there's going to be the files you have to back up, which you can do using this. The WordPress data you can back up using Backup Buddy, and I'm sure there's a utility that'll go through and back up all your databases and all your cPanels automatically, but that part I'm doing manually. So if you discover that, let me know, and then that'll make my little backup system even better. So here's the thing about optimizing for offline backup. See, for me, like for example, the HostGator files that I back up, I really don't need to put them on Amazon as well, right? Because they're already on my website. They're already on, both these drives. If both these drives should fail, I still have the stuff on my website, so I don't really need another copy on Amazon. So I have a folder on my S drive. Don't ignore these little lines at the bottom. I just forgot to delete them. It shouldn't be part of the image. So I back up my websites here, and they do get backed up automatically to the redundant file server, but they don't make it to Amazon. On the other hand, the stuff that I'm working on that's important, that has to do with my business, the finances, coaching agreements, content, whatever else, that will get backed up to Amazon. Okay, because I want to make sure the vital stuff is going to survive a catastrophic failure. And so you could also look at each computer you have, or in my case, it's only the desktop I have to think about, and sort of make a decision about, well, which one of the files do you want to save in the so-called I don't know what you would even call it. I mean, I think I called everything that I want archived. I think about Amazon as my archives. And so everything that I want archived, I put in a folder called archives, or my archives actually. It's my archives. And then things like software applications that I buy, any product assets like videos, training, PDFs, documents, recordings, anything like that, all my financial information that I've downloaded, any email and contacts that I have stored, basically anything that's really crucial to the operation of my business, I put into the My Archives folder, and the My Archives folder gets copied all the way through to Amazon. And everything else, if it's not in the My Archives folder, I don't have a separate folder for it. I just kind of know that it's not going to get archived all the way through unless it's in My Archives. And so that makes it easy for me, to optimize the space that I use here. And quite often, what I'll do is, if it's something that I know I'm not going to use for a long time, like if I just finished a workshop and chances are I'm not going to use that content forever, I'll just zip it up, right? And so zip it up, sometimes you can actually reduce the file sizes, by 3, 5, 10 times. And so not only does that make backing up faster, but it reduces the amount of space you pay for on Amazon. Okay, and so, and of course you don't have to do this with your laptop, because your laptop is just going to synchronize to the Dropbox thing on your desktop, so that automatically gets backed up properly. So in terms of automating them, you can use a piece of software like GoodSync or LiveMesh or Dropbox, whatever, to synchronize your computer drives live. This is optional, but I recommend you consider doing it. It's just, especially if you have a couple of laptops floating around that you're using, or even one laptop, but you want to synchronize you want to make sure that what's on your desktop and your laptop is always the same. So if you're on, and by the way, GoodSync isn't the only one that will do this for you, but nor is Dropbox. I'll give you a couple of options. These are just the ones that I happen to choose. And then what you want to do is you want to program GoodSync or whatever software you're using to back up the primary data from your computers. And in this case, in my case, it's from my desktop and my websites. And I put them onto the RAID drives. So again, in my case, that means I back them up into my DRobo. In your case, it might mean you put them onto an external USB drive and then make a copy of that to the redundant drive, or it could be a G-Safe drive, whatever it is. But the first step is automate GoodSync to take your the primary data and get it off the computer and make a couple of copies of it, so that you can be sure that it's there when you need it if you should happen to lose it. Then what you want to do is, if you do have a redundant server configuration, while you're backing up the primary data, as soon as you finish backing it up, then what you want to do is make sure that you synchronize that to your redundant server. So for example, in my case, after I finish backing everything up onto my the DRobo S that's connected to my desktop, then the next job runs that says, well, take my DRobo S stuff and make a copy of it to my DRobo FS, which is my file server on the network. Okay, and then that makes sure that my backups are current on a daily basis. But you can do daily, weekly, whatever you like. It really depends on how much data you change and how much important data you change. So, internally on your local network, you're not really paying for bandwidth or anything else. So, do it daily if you can, and then you'll be nice and safe and secure. And then back up your redundant server or your RAID server, wherever all of your data is stored, and back it off to an offline server on a weekly or monthly basis. So this is, once you have the configuration done, you're literally creating 3 or 4 jobs in GoodSync, and that's about it. And then you fire them up and you run. And you can run the daily backups manually, or you can say at 6 p.m. every night, run the daily backups, and then you can run the redundancy synchronizations in the middle of the night automatically. And so during the day when you're working, there's no backing up or anything going on. The computer's all yours to use fully. All the bandwidth and all the processor time is yours to use. So each one of these activities, backing up, synchronizing this to redundant server and backing up to offline, these are GoodSync jobs, they call them. And then again, if you live sync or live mesh your computers, you don't have to do anything but configure it initially. They'll just automatically update in real time. So it's pretty hands-off. So these are the primary tools and resources I recommend you take a look at if you want to do something similar to what I'm doing. So the first thing is the DRobo drives and servers. And at this point, I recommend that you look at using the 3 terabyte Western Digital Green Caviar drives. They're green, they're energy efficient, and they're very high capacity drives. You don't have to put all 5 in there. You can put like 2 or 3 to get started, because remember, if you put 3 terabytes in there, because you're doing a redundant RAID, you're going to use only 1.5 because you're duplicating the backup, right? So probably you want to start with at least 2 of these drives, and they're about 125 to 150 bucks a piece. They're not really expensive, less than the price of a USB drive, and you can get started with 2 drives, and you'll have basically 6 terabytes of RAID redundant backup data. Okay, and the website is drobo.com. If you want to check out the G-Safe drives, you can go to g-technology.com and then either drill down to their products or use this this link directly. Looks like it carved up the top end of the, this should be an F. It's G-Safe and this is CFM. I'll fix that when I print it, but it looks like it got trimmed a little bit. The font is a little bit too high for the space there. Okay, so take a look at those. If you want to take a look at GoodSync, that software is at goodsync.com. And if you want to check out Amazon S3, there's the link to Amazon S3. So these are basically the tools that I use. Oh, and I forgot to add Dropbox in here, which is dropbox.com. Now, if you want to look at some other tools, these are some of the tools that I looked at that I thought were pretty good, but they just didn't happen to do exactly everything that I wanted to at the time. And but these are sort of some of the more popular ones that you could look at if you want to, if you want to do some more research or look around, if you want to find one that meets your needs a little bit better than the configuration I have. So Live Mesh, I mentioned to you, this is Windows. If you're on a PC, by the way, Live Mesh doesn't work with a Mac, so this is a Windows only Microsoft product. and this will keep all of your Microsoft Windows computers synced up. If you don't use Live Mesh, that's when you want to use Dropbox. If you have a mixture of PCs and Macs, then you want to use Dropbox. Norton Ghost is an excellent backup software that you can use instead of GoodSync, and it will do things like compress the file. It'll test the file integrity. It'll let me see. It'll keep revisions of the files automatically, so you could tell it to keep 2 or 3 revisions. And also another another cool thing that it does, if you want to be able to recover your computer drive exactly, so you can just literally plug in a new one and reinstall it, I mean with all of the bookmarks and registry entries and configurations and personalizations and all that stuff that you did, it will also save an image of your drive rather than individual files. So it's a pretty popular backup software if you're on the Mac, and I think that's primarily Mac. Sorry, Norton Ghost is primarily PC. So if you're on a Mac, you can look at Carbon Copy Cloner, you can look at ChronoSync, and of course you can use Time Machine, which comes installed on your Mac. Now, Time Machine is great, but it's really great for the first level backup of primary to from your hard drive on your desktop to your primary drive. It doesn't do as easy a job and as clean a job of backing up your backup to the redundant or to the RAID drives, but it's an excellent way to keep your hard drive on your Mac instantly backed up, and this will automatically save older versions of files up to however many revisions you specify. So it's a very popular, very cool tool, but I would use this for primary data backup, and then I would still want to use something like GoodSync or Norton Ghost or ChronoSync or whatever to do the other backups. So if you want to look at other offline backup and synchronization services, these are backup, like their synchronization, their storage, their backup. They have all sorts of different plans. They have all different, you really need to read these carefully, because, for example, I was using Carbonite for a long time, and then I realized that they weren't backing up a lot of files, and when I called Carbonite, they said, oh yeah, because we don't back up .avi files by default, and oh, by the way, we don't back up files that are bigger than a certain size, but if you want, you can pay extra for that, but once you pass a certain limit of bandwidth, then we throttle you back. And it was literally taking me 3 months to back up video files. And so you want to read the terms of service, make sure that if you use these backup services, these offline backup services, that they have the bandwidth, the capacity, and the flexibility to back up all the files that you need in the way that you want. Because the last thing you want is, and it almost happened, I went to look at my Carbonite backup, and wouldn't you know it, the one folder that I just deleted that I thought I was going to easily recover from Carbonite ended up having the files that were too big or against the terms of service, or not against terms of service, but beyond the capacity that they provided for, and they weren't in the offline backup. So luckily, I had redundant drives, I was able to do it. But if you're going any one of these services that you use, please make sure you read through carefully, and make sure that even if you have to pay another $5 or $10 a month more for it, get the package that's going to meet your needs. Okay, and you have to read them carefully because they're all different. Right, and I mean, I've spent months going through these things, and I've tried at least half of them, and some of them will do what you want, some of them won't. What you want to really be careful about, especially if you're using this as your sort of catastrophic backup emergency plan, is you want to make sure it's going to back up every file on your redundant server. That's the primary thing you want to be concerned about. Okay, and the PDF for these guys, I'm getting people who are asking for me to put up these slides again, but don't worry, because don't write these down or anything, because the PDF will be in the members area tomorrow or the day after with the recording. So all of these will be listed there for you. And I'm noticing here too that the font is scrunching down, so it's clipping the top line. So just I'll fix that, but just know that some of these that look like they're T's are actually F's. Like here, this is Media Fire, not Media Tire. Everything else looks pretty much okay. Okay, I'll just go through that and clean that up for you before I produce the PDF. Okay, and that's about it. That's as much as I wanted to say on that. And I think my goal was to sort of give you an overview of what to watch out for, and give you really fundamentally one or two options. I didn't want to give you lots of different options because I know that this thing can get highly technical. It can really blow your mind, and you can spend lots of hours looking at it, trying to figure out what's the best combination, and so on. And so, what I would recommend is, take a look at what I've got and what I've used, because I put this together and developed it like over the last 4 or 5 years. Well, literally from the time I started my business, but more intensively in the last 4 or 5 years. And if you're in the same boat that I am, i.e., you work from home, you've got a network configuration, you've got 2 or 3 PCs, and you've got all your data for your business on 1 or 2 of those computers, you might find that this configuration works for you. And if you want to substitute DRobo with GSafe, or if you find another one, that's fine. But know this, that if you go through the DRobo site and you find that it does everything you want, jump on it, because you could spend months reading about all the technology and all of the options and all the other things. And some of them will be a little bit more suited to you, some of them won't be. But if DRobo does what you want it to do, and essentially what we talked about for you, and it's within your budget, just go for it. And if not, plan B is the GSafe, and if that doesn't work, then the USB drives. So make it fit your needs, but try not to get sucked into having to do any more research. Try to review the stuff I gave to you and see if it works for you. If it does, take a leap of faith and implement it the way I described it, and you likely won't find yourself losing data that you cannot recover. Okay, great. So I will now take Q&A. If you have questions, you can raise your hand on the control panel by pressing *2, or you can go ahead and type it in the webinar control panel. So first questions I will ask are going to have to do with the backing up stuff, and when we finish with those, if there's time left over, we'll answer generic coaching questions as well. Okay, so Julie says, is GoodSync keeping you synced, or is Dropbox doing it too? In my case, it's both. In my case, Dropbox is doing my real-time synchronization, and GoodSync is doing my scheduled backups. It's not doing my real-time synchronization. So I happen to use both of them in that way. Julie says, spell it. I think that was DRobo, D-R-O-B-O. So you got that. Thanks. And Julie says, what about the battery backup to protect against power surges? Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but I know that not everybody has a battery backup, and I know that sometimes people buy battery backups. They cost like $14-15, and that's not going to do the job. The kind of battery backup that you need to prevent the possibility of failure on your network is going to cost you $400-500, and yours cost over 100. Yeah, so it's probably a better one. And it, hopefully it'll do a good job of it. What you want is one of these battery surge protectors that actually take over. It's almost like a what do you call this? Almost like a generator, right? It builds up charge so that it can gracefully cause the devices to wind down. Now here's the problem though. If I have does that work with my router? Does it work with my server that's in the other room? Does it work with my USB drive that's plugged in? Chances are it only works with the devices that I have plugged into that battery surge protector. So if I can do it all in one outlet, then it's a good thing, right? That I highly recommend that. But it's not necessarily going to protect all of my devices, and I don't want to have a battery surge protector, in 3 or 4 different rooms and so on. So I think for the main computer and the main data, it's excellent to have one. And it sounds like you got one that's going to protect against the major surges and maybe even gracefully power down your devices. So that's exactly the kind that you want, Julie. And that's one thing that can happen. But remember, if somebody walks into your house one day and takes all your equipment, then your battery surge protector doesn't protect against that too. So that's why I kind of grouped catastrophic failure and theft in the same bag, because it's one of those things that very unlikely to happen, but when it does, your entire network could disappear, and that is the argument for having it offline. So if you feel protected enough with a battery surge device, and you're not worried about break-ins and stuff like that, which most of us don't need to worry about, then you might be okay. You may not feel the need to do offline backups. I got to the point where I'm not particularly worried about it, but it's fairly inexpensive insurance in the rare case that something does happen. Okay, so that's the argument for offline, is catastrophic or theft. So the next question, spell that one too. Julie, I forgot what the second one was that you wanted me to spell. So let me see. So Howard says, backup-smart.com to automatically back up your site files and database backups. It's a desktop app. Okay, I'll put that in the GoToWebinar control. But this is a resource from Howard. I haven't seen it, but it looks like it will automatically back up your site files and your database. Great, that's excellent. So that could be just what I'm just looking for. Thanks, Howard. Howard says, you lose all your data if you don't start with a full deck of drives and you want to add more. It reformats all of the drives for RAID functionality. When you say it, what are you referring to there? Oh, are you thinking DRobo there, Howard? Or something else, I'm not sure. Yes, right. So it's true. So when you use your DRobo, what you don't want to do is you don't want to take the drives with your data on them right now and insert them into the DRobo drive, because the first thing the DRobo is going to do is initialize the drives and write over top of everything that's on there to configure what it needs to create the backup drive, the RAID drive, and all the rest of it. So what you want to start with is a couple of clean drives, plug them into DRobo, get it all configured and everything, and then back up your existing data over to the DRobo. Yeah, that's really important. Thanks, Howard, for saying that. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, that the DRobo install process actually says, hey, I'm going to wipe everything out. Are you sure you want to do this? But just in case, if you do use DRobo, keep that in mind. You want to start with some clean drives and make the first backup. And you know what? That's good practice anyway. Anytime you're going to write over the only copy of data that you have, you probably want to think twice about that, right? So it's good practice just to go ahead and do that, whether or not DRobo did it anyway. Because look, I've actually had, I tried a Windows server they call them home server, right? So they give you a little server and they put a Microsoft Windows Server Edition, and it sits on your network as a network attached storage device. And so I got one of these things, I set it all up, I put it in there, and I ended up, I can't remember exactly what I did, but I ended up, I think, plugging in one of my existing data drives into the USB port in the back of the thing, and wouldn't you know it, just wiped the whole thing out. I was like, well, thanks a lot. Don't even bother telling me, just wipe out my drive, why don't you? So, again, luckily, I had a second copy of it again, but if that had been my only copy, you just don't 100% trust any piece of software. Protect your primary data always. Okay, so let's see now. So Linnea says, hey Lou, great prezzo here. Thanks. You are welcome. Did I hear you say you found a GoodSync program for mixed PCs Mac environment? Yeah, GoodSync will support both platforms. So that's what I was using when I had a mixed PC environment, and that's what I still use now. So whether you have only Windows or only Mac or both, GoodSync will support you. Wes says, you just answered my question when you answered Julie's. Okay. Julie says, I only have one backup drive at this point, but we'll definitely look into AWS offline backup too. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, I mean, you could back up that one drive to offline and you're done. Maybe you don't even need the redundant configuration in that case. The only thing about backing up to Amazon offline all the time is you want to watch your costs, right? There's two things actually. So one is costs, which can add up if you're moving a lot of files back and forth. And the other one is bandwidth. So most of our service providers, they'll provide a high speed to download files, but they'll provide a relatively low speed to upload files. So you may have like a 1 or 2 megabit per second upload speed. So in my case, for example, if I create 2 or 3 videos, let's say I record a couple of hours worth of Action Coaching Club calls, the ScreenFlow files or the raw data files for those MOV files sometimes can end up being 3, 4, 5, 6 gigabytes. So I have 2 or 3 or 4 of those after a week, and it's going to take forever to upload them by FTP, because my internet service provider limits the amount of speed that it'll use to actually throw files upline, right? So I want something backed up today. That's going to take a week to complete the backup. That sort of defeats my purpose. And so for that purpose, I have a couple of local drives that back up instantly, and then I do a weekly backup to the offline. Because then if it takes a week or two or whatever to back up all those files, no problem, because I still have it backed up here. Okay, so you might want to think about that too, Julie. Wes says, thanks. It was something like MySQL. Oh, yeah, Julie, that's something that's in your cPanel. It's a MySQL, and it just basically is. I don't know if it's a protocol or a set of rules that or a structure for your databases. It's kind of the standard way to format a database and to save and retrieve files from a database online. It used to be used in the corporate world, and then now they use it on servers. And so every time you have a WordPress blog, it creates a database to hold all your content and things like that. And the database is formatted as a MySQL database. If you go into your cPanel, you just search for MySQL, and you're going to see there's going to be a MySQL wizard. There's going to be a MySQL. There's going to be a create database routine, a whole thing. But you really don't have to worry too much about that. Just know that when you go into the backup process in your cPanel, let me see if I can do this for you somehow here. I'll try to do this in the background and come back to it. But when you go through the backup process in your cPanel, you don't have to worry about knowing that it's MySQL. It'll just back it up for you. Okay. I'm going to see if I can show you that real quick before we go. If I start with 2 drives and I want to add more drives, it will erase the data already on the 2 drives. No, that's actually not true, Howard. If I start with 2 drives that are already DRobo formatted, and I want to add drives, I can do it hot swap. So I started with a couple of drives, and when they were full, I added a 3rd one, and it didn't erase the drive or anything like that. It just expanded the capacity. Now, if you start with 2 drives that are not DRobo formatted and then you initialize them, it will. But part of the promise of DRobo is that you can expand and you can hot swap drives. You don't have to worry about the data. Because the idea about being RAID is that one of those drives could fail at any time and all the data should be intact. That's the promise of DRobo. So no reason why it should have to reinitialize all the drives. That is definitely not the case. I can share that with you from experience. Howard uses Synology, Synolgy. Let's see what that is. Oh, network attached storage. Yeah, okay. So same kind of idea, right? So what this is a piece of hardware that's basically a disk drive or series of disk drives, and it sits on your network. So any device that can talk over the internet can access it. Okay, and so it looks like this does RAID and things like that. So this might be an alternative to DRobo. And I don't know if it does the infinitely expandable thing, or Howard, does it do that? Like, can I just keep adding bigger and bigger drives to this without having to replace the basic appliance? Yeah, that even looks a lot like DRobo, actually. See, because it says 45 terabyte capacity. Mine up to 4 drives. Okay, but up to 4 drives, but let's say, for example, let's say you had 4 2 terabyte drives and now you wanted to replace one with a 3 terabyte drive. Could you do it? Or do you need a new device? Okay, anyway, I will, here's the resource for you guys, and I'll add that to the list actually. So thanks, Howard. I don't know much about it, but Howard is apparently very happy with it. So he says you could, but you would need to reinitialize. Yeah, but if I need to reinitialize, then I need another device to back up all my data so that when I'm reinitializing, I don't lose stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. I think you're convincing me I still want to stay with Robo. You can use Shell. Who knows what Shell is, my friend? Okay. Fair enough. Good. So this is what Howard uses. So if you want to check that out, do that as well. And like I said, it's really important that you have something like, look, even if it's not the perfect solution, or even if you have to upgrade it or change it tomorrow, whatever, just really important that you do something for backing up. And so, like I said, GSafe will do it. Apparently Synology is an option. dRobo is an option. These are great devices because it'll help you not have to have a whole stack of external USB drives. A lot of them have FireWire or eSATA interfaces, which are much faster than USB usually. So there's a whole lot of good reasons for paying a little extra to get these drives inside a case and attaching them to your server. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so that looks like a good resource. So thanks, Howard. I appreciate your feedback on that. And I'm glad to see that you're doing backup. Good job. Okay. Linnea says, thanks. That's SQL. So adding a couple of my external backup drives is the better idea. I think I would say first step, Julie, is to back up your backup. And that means, if you have to have another external backup drive, or whether you use a chassis, a network attached storage, whatever it is, but have a local copy of your backup. So you have a backup of your primary data, and then you have a local backup of your backup. And then that's the one, every week or two or every month that you back up offline. Julie says, got it. I will back up my backup. Great. Excellent. Okay. So, Julie, just give me 1 second, because what I'm going to try to do is log into my cPanel here in the background, and I'll show you real quick for Julie and everybody else. I'll show you how to find the backup procedure in your cPanel. Okay, so here I am in my cPanel for my account, and if you go down, what you'll see right here, here are the backups. Okay, now if you want to look at your databases, here's the database section, right? So this is MySQL databases. Now, generally speaking, you don't have to worry about managing these, because your software will, if you use a software application that needs a database, it'll automatically create the database. And it may ask you to define a username and a password, but all the initialization, setting up, creation of the database, you typically wouldn't have to worry about. Like WordPress just kind of does that behind the scenes for you. Okay, and then if you actually wanted to go in and play around with the data, you would go into phpMyAdmin, but I don't recommend you do that. If this doesn't look familiar, you don't really generally have to get into the databases, but just so that you know, these are all of the databases for all of your programs are stored here. Now, for backing up, what you could do here, for example, you could back up, just click the backups button. And what you'll want to do, generally speaking, is you'll want to download or generate a full website backup. Okay, now this is okay if you don't run into the limits of bandwidth or number of files or things like that. Like if you go back to my situation here, let me see. Yeah, see, it says backup failed, because my disk usage is way beyond the levels that they're comfortable with. And it says if backups ran now, your account would not be backed up, because I have 294,000 files and their maximum is 100,000. I have almost 60 gigabytes worth of data. Their maximum is 20 gigabytes. So you see, in this particular case on the database, this would not work. I couldn't back it up. So as long as you are within the limits of your hosting provider, then you're going to be able to do a full backup directly from cPanel. Okay. As soon as you start going over them like this, you got to go somewhere else. But your cPanel will tell you that you're within these limits. If you are, then all you need to do is generate a full website backup. And you say, well, where should I put the backup? Well, you say, well, I'm going to put it on the home directory of my website, or I have an FTP server. And you could literally, like if you have an FTP site where you store all your backups, you can give it the username and log in here, right? And it'll just log into that server and put all of your stuff onto that server. But you don't really need one. You can just put it on your home directory. That's usually okay. You could use passive mode or active mode. It doesn't just, normally you don't worry about that. And secure copy, that's a whole other thing directory. So 90% of the time, if you're well within the limits of your inodes and your memory or your storage usage, just go ahead and put a copy on your home directory. And then that way you'll know that it's all backed up. and then you just simply click generate backup, and it'll generate the backup and email you when the backup is done, and it'll tell you where it is, where to find it. If you want to go, and then if you want to restore a backup, if you have data loss, then what you could do here is just restore either a home directory backup, or you can restore just the database alone. So if you happen to have saved only the databases, like here for example, download a MySQL database. If you wanted to save only, this database for example, you don't have to save all of them. You can save each of them individually. Then you can restore them individually here as well. Okay, like I said, you probably don't want to worry too much about that. Just use the full backup and restore, and that'll take care of you most of the time. Because what you're trying to protect against is, some sort of catastrophic backup, catastrophic failure on your website. Okay, and these are all the backups and whatever. So you can see I have a lot of websites, a lot of domains on this particular one. That's why I'm running up against the limits. Okay, so the other thing that it allows you to do is go through the backup wizard. And the backup wizard, then you can get a little fancier, right? So you can back up your home directory. You can back up just your MySQL databases. You can back up only your email forwarders. So if you have a need to back up just part of your content, not all of it, then you can go through the wizard, and you can just say back it up. Then you say, do I want to back up everything? Do I want to do a full backup, or do I want to back up my home directory, databases, or email stuff? And then you might say full backup, and then you're back to where you started from without the wizard, right? Okay, so normally for this you would do like, I want to do my MySQL databases, and it'll say, okay, those are all of the databases. Select the full or partial. Download your partial backup type. Okay, then I guess I have to do these all individually. I don't see a place where I can do them all at once, so I'm going to end up having to do them all individually. Right, so not a big difference. That's why I rarely use it. I just, like I said, easiest things, just go into the backups, do a full directory backup, and you're all good to go. Okay, and that is backing up in MySQL from your cPanel. Julie says, thanks, the cPanel stuff has been mystifying me. Yeah, it's a little tricky. There's only really a couple of things you need to do in cPanel. Usually, one is to get to the file manager so you can find your sites and edit them and upload and download them. The other one is to create new blogs. The other one might be to upload and download, video, audio, things like that. I mean, for the most part, all of this stuff in here is it's just there if you need advanced support, but typically you don't have to worry about it. And then of course, if you have a shared system with unlimited domains like mine, the only other thing you do is add an extra domain every time you want to open up a new website, kind of thing. But it's literally, I could probably say, if I haven't clicked on more than 5 or 6 of these buttons for 98% of the time. And it would be backups, file manager, add-on domains, email accounts, usually actually email forwarders, and that's probably it. I don't really use much else. So I mean, you could get really fancy. I have used things like MX and CNAMEs and all that kind of stuff, the zone editor. I have done that like for advanced reasons and because I kind of understand the technology. But frankly, if you had to do that, you could probably pay somebody $5, $10, $15 on Rent-A-Coder, and they would do the same thing for you. Or very oftentimes, you could just get somebody online, like in HostGator. You just get somebody on chat from the support team, and they'll walk you through how you have to do it. And that's how I learned to use all that stuff anyway. They got the support team, I may as well make use of them, right? Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm seeing Wes's hand up though. Let me check in with you, Wes, real quick. Hi, Wes, and welcome to the call.
Hello. You'd already answered my question, Lou.
I did? Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, it looks like we have about 6 minutes left, so I'm not sure that we can get into too much coaching. But if anybody's got 1 or 2 quick questions, we got another 5 or 6 minutes. I'll be happy to answer them. Just go ahead and type them in the GoToWebinar control panel. And if it's not related to the backup stuff, that's fine. I think we're pretty much done for the backing up Q&A. So feel free to ask. Yeah, absolutely, Wes. Ask a simple one. Here, I'll open your line again. just go ahead and ask me over the phone, Wes.
Oh, yeah, sure. I wanted to ask if we have a couple minutes. I keep getting trapped in information overload or bright, shiny objects. Do you have a couple words of wisdom?
Wow. This is one of those things that it's really seductive and irresistible, isn't it? Like, to me, these things are like crack cocaine. It's like I know it's not good for me, but it's almost impossible to resist. So, look, ultimately, the way that I did it for myself is I put aside a certain amount of money for new tools and learning and teaching and whatever else. I literally made it a percentage of my income. And I said, if there's no money in that account, then the answer is automatically no. Unless I want to borrow against that account because I know for sure that if I use this, I'm going to generate income this month, and here's how. But ultimately, you have to make a promise to yourself. And what helped for me is to have a separate location, a separate account where I would funnel money into. And that was the total amount of money that I could spend on new stuff. And if I'm not spending money on new stuff, then chances are I'm not actually taking the time to learn it and jumping from one thing to another either, which means I spend more time on what's strategic, and get more focused and focus more on creating products, making sales. And it's hard. It's really hard, especially if you are like me. You're a lifelong learner and you love to learn new stuff, and it all sounds fantastic, and you see the possibilities and the opportunity with everything. Like I said, to me, it's like crack cocaine. And so I did two things, actually. One is I made sure my coach held me accountable. And I do this with my clients too. A couple of my clients, like my one-to-one clients, they give me permission to be their, what do you call that, controller. So they basically come on and they'll say, okay, so I'm thinking about buying this, or I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm thinking about, experimenting with that. And they give me permission to say no. So until and unless they give me a really good reason, so they have to literally, it's almost like in the corporate world, right? If you wanted to go on a course, you have to convince your manager, his manager, the VP, and the controller, and the finance guy. And you have to compare it against budget. And so I sort of act like the sober second thought. And actually what happens over time is initially they come and some of them will come and they'll have all sorts of great reasons. And I'll say, right, but we decided you were working on this. And if you do that, you're not going to be working on that, right? Yes, right. Okay, good. Then the answer is no. And they'll go, come on, you don't. I say, listen, it's your choice. You can do whatever you want, but you gave me the veto power. So right now the answer is no. And if they go along with it over time, what I find is they come up with less and less things that they want to try. And when they want to try, most of the time they're making arguments that are based on logic and sound reasoning. It's not just, oh, I really want to do it, or this sounds so good, or but they had so much success with it, it's got to work for me. Usually it's, well, this month we decided we're going to do a little list building. This is a tool that does list building. It does it in the social media space. My stuff is largely on Facebook. I can put it into action. It looks like within the next week or two, I'm gonna put it into action and make it work. If it doesn't work, I'll exercise my guarantee. But if it does work, I should add an extra 1,000 people to the list, which is twice as much as we planned on doing this month. And then I'll say, sounds good, go for it. Right? And so it's really just conditioning yourself to do that for yourself. So for me, got myself a coach and I gave him veto power, set up a separate account, and the only money that went into separate account was siphoned off of sales. It was 10 or 15% of sales. So if I wanted to chase those objects, if I wanted to go all those courses and do everything, I had to earn my way into it. And then the third one is I just practiced, vetoing myself over time. And it's, I still succumb to it. But it's much better than it used to be. And so maybe some of those techniques will work for you as well.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Yep. Does any of that resonate with you? Is that anything that feels like it might help? Or is it just like, is it tried that, done that, doesn't work? Got to try something new.
No, it's what I'm doing. Part of Eben's, I have the coach from Eben's program, and she, instead of once a month, she's keeping me accountable to once every 2 weeks. But during the 2 weeks, I can get so far down the train tracks, I lose sight of the mountains that I'm trying to climb.
Yeah.
And then I remember that date's coming up, and then I hang a U-turn and I do, roadrunner speed back to the mountains, and just to get caught back up to where I was supposed to be. And so it just seems so overwhelming because, gosh, you just see all this stuff and it's like, oh, I gotta have that. Oh, I need this. Oh, and as I learn more, I see other tools that I can put, but I haven't even finished using the ones that I had. So I just thought I would ask for your words of wisdom. I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And one thing I was going to say next week, but I'll say it now since you brought it up, was, a lot of these things are absolutely really excellent tools and great. Some of the guys are putting out stuff that's fantastic. It's really spectacular. But the truth is that no matter how much I want to use all that stuff, I only have a finite period of time to use them. And so what's the real wake-up call for me is, am I able to meet my monthly obligations financially for myself and for my family, for my lifestyle and everything else? And that's what I'm in business for. And you got to constantly remember that the stuff that comes out, as good as it is, may or may not necessarily be right for you right now. It may be down the road, but right now, like if you're, I'll talk to people who want to implement all sorts of, sophisticated upsell, cross-sell testing, stuff, and I go, well, how many products do you have? Well, I haven't got my first product yet. Oh, well, okay, but so how big is your list? Well, I don't have an opt-in page yet. But if I use this tool and that tool and run that launch, and I go, whoa. You're trying to play in the NFL, but you're just putting your first pair of football shoes on. So let's take it easy a little bit here and go step by step. And to get to the level where a lot of these advanced learnings and trainings will actually benefit you, you can go a long way with very basic tools. It's more the strategy that's important. Like you literally, you can't put up ugly websites like we could 5 years ago, but you don't have to, because WordPress makes putting up great looking websites easier now. But if you just focus on building your list, getting to know what they want, and making them offers, those three things alone, plain and simple, without all the fancy stuff and all the tactics and strategies and urgency devices and software that squeezes, that scans an urgency thing past them and gives them 30 seconds and then pops them up and runs a sophisticated product launch with a 3 sequence of videos and all. If you just say, you know what, I'm just going to make an offer and I'm going to go put people in front of it, you could go a long way. And then when you get to that point where you've got that machine kind of working for you, you can really luxuriate in all of those fun new things that you can experiment with and learn about, because you know that whether or not you use them doesn't matter, because your business is generating a nice income.
Thank you, sir. What happened on my last call Friday afternoon, she pulled me back to earth and said, go back to the Action Coaching Club checklist that you started with when you started with Lou, and she said, you're doing wonderful, but you're getting way out there. You need to come back, reground yourself, and do each step by step.
Exactly.
Because I took her all through all the wonderful things that I've been doing, and I showed her all the neat stuff, and she said, Wes, but what's your basic message? And I was like, well, yeah, good question.
Yep, that's great advice. That's great coaching. I couldn't agree more, and I hope that you'll heed that advice. And the power of that checklist, boy, I tell you, it will serve you very, very well. So keep it simple, keep it direct, and if it's not building your list, if it's not creating your products, if it's not converting into sales, you probably don't have to work on it right now.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Take care, Wes.
You too, sir.
All right, Ulrika, I see your question here. I wonder, can we hold off for Thursday to answer that question, Ulrika? Because I'm coming to the limit of time, and I'm coming to the limit of my throat right now. So unless it's urgent or timely, if it's something that you're working on right now, in which case I'll gladly spend a little bit of time. But if it can wait till Thursday, let me know, and then we'll talk about it on Thursday. Okay, I'm not getting any answer yet, so can wait. Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll talk on Thursday. Okay? All right. So let me fast forward to the thank you slide. And I'll just say, as always, thanks, you guys. Listen, I always appreciate being here in this conversation with you. I hope that you'll take on some of these backup things tonight and back up all of your very important personal and business data so that you never have to experience the fear and dread of wondering how to recover really valuable or sentimental data. And if you have any questions about implementing this as you go, bring them into coaching. I'll be happy to help you. But I think you'll find that this will work for you. And try to keep it simple, because that's the secret to this as well. This can get very complex. Try to just make it automated in 2-3 steps, the way we talked about it. As always, I appreciate you being here. Because you're here, I get to do this work, which is fun and fulfilling for me, and I really value that, and I appreciate you for that. And I want to say I'm sorry. I know I'm coughing in your ear a lot lately. I'm doing the best I can, but this thing just won't go away. So I'll keep working on getting that better, and while you keep working on helping a lot of people, having a lot of fun, making a lot of money, and doing a lot of good. Until next time we meet, have a great couple days. I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks for now. Good night. Namaste.